My past is not the best, but I finally turned myself around. I found the love of my life, who's always there for me. Well, I decided to have a pretty elegant wedding. I invited my family, he invited his family, but there's something that my sister just had to do at the most important day of my life. Well, let me share with you guys how she decided to ruin it. I remember feeling like I didn't belong anywhere when I was growing up. I was always the chubby kid who didn't fit in with the popular crowd, and that made me feel like I was worth less than everybody else. The teasing, name-calling, it was endless, and it was tough to keep a brave face when all I wanted to do was cry. As I got older, I found myself gravitating towards the wrong crowd. I hung out with people who didn't care about me as a person, but only what I could offer them. I would throw myself at guys simply because I wanted acceptance, and these guys would simply toss me aside after using me for their desires. It was a sad existence, but I didn't know any better. All I knew was that I wanted to feel needed, and if that meant putting myself in situations that weren't healthy, then so be it. My parents found out about my lifestyle in an embarrassing way, just before I started college, and they were devastated. I had gotten high on a drug before, and I could get sober. My parents went through my things and were very much shocked at their findings. There were drugs and adulterated materials in my room. They tried talking to me about the dangers of what I was doing, but I didn't listen. I was convinced that I knew what was best for me. Even though I was clearly on a path of self-destruction, my parents soon went from talking to me out of that lifestyle to just straight up criticizing me. Thankfully, my younger sister Rosalind was there to keep them sane. She was the perfect child in their eyes, and I couldn't help but feel like a disappointment in comparison. College was a blur of relationships that just never seemed to work out. I was always the one who ended up getting hurt, but I didn't care. I was living in the moment, and if that meant putting myself in harm's way, then so be it. When I graduated, I knew I had to face the reality of going home, but I couldn't bear the thought of being in a place where everyone knew my name and my past. So I got a place of my own, far away from everyone and everything I knew. Living on my own was liberating in a way. I could do whatever I wanted without anyone breathing down my neck. But I'll be honest with you, it was also lonely. I didn't have anyone to talk to, and my thoughts often spiraled out of control. The nights were the worst when I was left alone with my thoughts and regrets. I wondered where my life was headed, and if I would ever find true happiness. I was a bad girl during the day, and a lonely girl during the night, with nobody to cry to. I thought that's how my life would possibly end, but things thankfully took a different route. It all started when one of my friends invited me to a housewarming party, organized by her brother's friend. I was reluctant to go at first, but my friends insisted, saying that I needed to get out more, so I agreed to go. When I got to the party, I was immediately struck by how different it was from the ones I was used to attending. The guests were very well dressed and well mannered. The atmosphere was subdued, more subdued than what I was used to. I felt out of place, but I just tried to blend in as much as possible. That's when I met Keith. We were all seated at the table when we started disagreeing on several issues. But instead of just getting annoyed, he was captivated by my wittiness and personality. Well, we talked for hours, and I found myself drawn to him in a way that I simply could not explain right here. He was different from any guy I've ever met before, and I was intrigued. Keith and I began keeping in touch after the party. We went on a few dates, and before I knew it, we were in a relationship, and he was a refined guy from a well-known home. I knew I had to keep in my dark about my lifestyle. I don't want him to leave me as the other guys have done once they found out about my past. I don't have any serious expectations from the relationship, though. I just appreciated the feeling of being wanted. To my surprise, Keith set up an engagement party. He proposed to me within 6 months of meeting. I was shocked and didn't know how to react. On one hand, I was ecstatic that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. But on the other hand, I knew that he was proposing to the person he felt he knew. And I just knew he would run away when he found out who I was, and when he wasn't around. Keith was a nice guy, but I had an ugly life that I could just ruin his image. So, I told him no. I couldn't bring myself to say yes, not when I knew that the whole thing would not last for long, once my lifestyle was made. Keith was hurt and confused, and I felt terrible. But I didn't give him any reason for my denial. I simply told him that it was too soon to be engaged, and as I walked away from Keith that day, I couldn't help but feel like I've made a huge mistake. But I knew that I couldn't go through with it. Not when there was so much about me that he didn't know. I just hoped that someday he would understand why I did what I did. After turning down Keith's proposal, I knew it was time to break off from him before he got too attached to me. So I stayed away from him for a while. He was obviously bothered about my sudden disappearance, but I couldn't bring myself to face him again. Staying away from Keith meant that I had to hide my lifestyle anymore. Well, that's a good thing. I began living life the way I usually did. Partying, hooking up with guys. One day, I went to a club where I got into a fight with a lady and the police were called. They had us arrested, and I had no one to call to help bail me out. I couldn't call my junior sister, Rosalind, who was recently married and living in a different city. I couldn't call my parents, who had tried countless times to talk to me, get me out of the lifestyle that I'm living, and, well, were now embarrassed about the person I've become. In desperation, I called Keith to come and get me. Keith was shocked when he received my phone call. He hadn't heard from me in days, and the last place he expected me to be calling from was a police station. So, he quickly rushed down to the station, where the police told him that I've been arrested at a club where I got into a fight with a lady while engaging in risky activities. I was super embarrassed at everything. Keith was surprised to learn that I was clubbing, engaging in all this behavior. It was not the lady he thought I was. So he got me bailed out, drove me down to my house, and asked for an explanation. Well, at this point I could no longer hide who I was behind the scenes. I told Keith about my dirty lifestyle, the parties, the men, and how I used them to fill the void in my life. I told him that I've hidden my lifestyle from him because I didn't want him to leave me as every other guy has. Keith said nothing for a few moments, and though I braced myself for what I knew was coming, I wasn't ready for the impact. Keith was visibly distraught. He just turned around and left without muttering a word. I don't think anything in my life had pained me so much. I cried long and hard that night. I would spend the whole of the next day looking at my phone in the hopes that this call would come, but it never did. I thought about reaching out to him, but I decided against it as I knew it was best that he was left alone. Things soon took a turn, though. I had expected Keith to walk out of my life for good at this point, but he didn't. He showed up at my doorstep 2 days later. I was expecting him to probably explain how disappointed he was, that I've deceived him, and yada yada, but his line of action took me by absolute shock. He took my hand, asked me to sit down with him. Keith told me that he loved me, and that he wanted to help me, to be there for me as I worked on bettering myself. I could not believe it. After everything I've done and all the things I've put him through, Keith was still willing to stand by me. This is what I call a miracle. It just has to be. He went further to me that he had fallen in love with me personally, and he loves my personality, not my looks or physique. He said he was willing to stay by my side despite my past. I felt like I've been given a second chance at life. From that moment on, Keith and I started working on building a new life together. Keith became my rock. He helped me drop the dirty lifestyle that had consumed me for so long. He made me enroll in therapy that day, and he was always there to support me when I needed him. He even went as far as cutting me off from friends who were not adding positivity values to my life. It was not an easy journey, and there were times when I wanted to just give up. But Keith was always there, encouraging me, supporting me, and loving me. Having Keith by my side just made the whole thing worth it. For the first time in my life, I began to believe that I was worth something, that I could be more than just a party girl. Years passed, and now I am a better person. I have found self-confidence and learned to love myself for who I am. With Keith's help, I was able to overcome my low self-esteem issues, becoming a more positive person to the world. One day, Keith suggested that I start a YouTube channel to tell my fans about my journey thus far. It wasn't something I've ever thought about, but it sounded like a good idea. So I started it, and it's gradually been growing over the years. People were inspired by my story and how I've overcome my struggles. I used my platform to help others who were going through similar situations, and it felt amazing to know that I was making a difference in people's lives. Recently, Keith proposed. I said yes. It's official. He's my fiancé and I am his. We will be going to see his parents next week, and I'm a little nervous. He's been telling his parents about, quote, this lady who has been inspiring people via her YouTube page, and her parents have been following my broadcast for a while. He even claims that his mother loves my content, though he's not told them that we are engaged. He knows they would just welcome the pleasant surprise the moment we meet by next week. What's up, everybody? Mr. Redito here. So today's story is actually a wild ride. Yeah, it might seem like everything's going good. Well, I have some updates for you. Update number 1's coming up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, just take a second and click that subscribe button. It does help support me a lot, and I really appreciate it. Here is your update. I finally met with Keith's parents. It was a disaster. They were thrilled the very moment when they saw me. Keith had told them that he was bringing a friend over, but never in the wildest imagines did they think I was going to be the one. His mother was all over me. She began telling me about how one of her friend's daughters, who had been struggling through the same thing which I passed through, was currently doing fine after she introduced her to my page. I was glad to hear and see my soon-to-be in-laws applaud my work. Keith's mother went ahead to say that it was a good thing I never let my look or physique determine the level of impact I make in life. I could already feel the love and acceptance in the atmosphere. I believed at this point in time that they would make the perfect in-laws. Looking and hearing them talk, I concluded that the apple did not fall far from the tree. Keith had picked his flawless character from his parents. They were not judgmental, and neither was he. They did not even look at my past, nor believe I deserved less in life because of it. Things were going super duper, until Keith announced to them that he and I were not just friends. He told them that we've known each other for a while, and he'd actually helped me through the entire process of recovery, and we're currently engaged. Wow, the look on their face changed the moment he talked about us being engaged. His parents, who were elated a short while ago, suddenly became cold, silent, at a loss for words. It was clear that our engagement was a hard pill to swallow. Keith's father broke the silence first by seeking Keith's audience privately. Keith went with his parents to the hallway where they began questioning his decision to get married to me. Keith told them he loved me for whom I was and not based on a past life. But his parents began talking about how there was every tendency for me to desire my previous life. They were displeased by his decision, that they did not notice I could hear their discussion from where I was, and I quote, "Marriage does not change a girl like her from the streets. You deserve better, son," his mother said. I was disappointed. This was the woman who, a few moments ago, was actually encouraging by telling me my past life should not define my future. She even told me that I did not deserve less in life. But it dawned on me that it was just all talk. They never actually meant what they were saying. How hypocritical can people be? If I deserved something good, then why were they now trying to stop their son from getting married to me? I was broken beyond words. I could not wait to hear what Keith's response to his parents would be. So, I immediately ran out of the house crying, and I know they heard me, because Keith came a-running. He picked me up and we drove home without saying goodbye to his parents. It's been a few hours since we got home, and I'm currently locked up in a room, all by myself. Well, I actually locked myself in here. Keith is probably asleep as he had failed in getting me to open the door. Update number 2. I don't think my relationship with Keith had ever faced the kind of difficulty we faced in the last few days. I had kept Keith at arm's length for days, even though we lived in the same house. I know it was wrong for me to take out my anger and frustration on him, as he was probably going through a lot too. I could not avoid him forever. We were bound to sit down and talk things out through at some point in time. And we finally did just that. Keith informed me that he did not share the same values and opinions with his parents on the matter, and still made reaffirming words to me about him being certain I was his wife. I was hurting, and though I appreciated his word, it did little to alleviate the pain. I suggested to him that we just go far away, have a quiet wedding, and did not involve any family members or friends. Keith refused. He said that it would only prove to people and my growing fans that I still had a lot of healing to do. He said that in the future, when I view things from a different perspective, I would likely regret letting people's opinions rule my life. Keith finally told me that we were going to get a grand wedding, and our both families would be aware of it. If they chose to sit it out, then that's their business. He only asked that I give him time to talk to his parents. Keith went to see his parents a few days later. We thought it's best that he went alone, and I didn't have the emotional stamina to face his parents after his mother called me what she did. He met with his parents and tried every possible means to get them to accept me and consent to our union, but they initially remained stubborn. His parents finally gave a condition that we would meet before they consented. They said that I was to shut down my YouTube channel and quit any form of activity that puts me in public view. Keith was mad. His parents felt embarrassed associating with me, and they wanted me to shut down something I've spent years of my life building. Keith expressed his displeasure. He told them that he was going to get married with or without their consideration, and if they missed his wedding for anything in the world, then they were to consider him dead, because he would consider him an orphan. I felt pride swell up in me as I listened to my man recount how the meeting had gone and how he had responded to his parents' demands. It meant a lot to me that he stood up to them on my behalf. We were already planning on seeing my parents and the possibility of getting a quiet wedding somewhere when his parents called a few days later to ask what the wedding plans were and when it was supposed to take place. Keith's apparent threat to disown them had actually worked out. I was happy because his parents were going to be present at our wedding, but then I knew they were probably doing so out of compulsion. It didn't matter though. What mattered was the fact that they were no longer fighting against our union. Keith and I are currently making plans to meet with my parents. I don't think my parents would be this difficult as his, though. Update number 3. Wow. Hey, I was wrong once again. The obstacle, Keith's parents, that my relationship with Keith encountering was not the last. Keith and I visit my parents, and it was the next worst thing that happened to us. It had been ages since I set my eyes on my parents. The last time they set their eyes on me was when they technically almost disowned me for my lifestyle. Besides the call we had a few days ago when I informed them I was coming to introduce my fiancé to them, we only communicated about twice over the years, and I felt that they would look forward to me coming home after all this time. I would say that they were surprised the moment they set their eyes on me. I appeared to be a different person from the daughter that they've known in the past. My dressing was moderate, my makeup was light, and I did not expose my body parts that were sensitive. I could tell they were wondering what on earth had happened to their daughter. There was, however, no physical display of affection like giving me a hug or whatever. They just looked like they were seeing a ghost. Before I could introduce Keith to them, they began assessing the kind of person he was with their eyes. They were obviously curious to know the kind of person who would be foolish enough to decide to marry their daughter, who, in their opinion, was no good. We all sat down, and Keith began to make the introductions. He talked about himself and how our path had crossed, before finally stating his interest in getting married. My parents rightfully judged Keith to be a refined man from well-to-do backgrounds, and they would often look at me each time he talked about the fact that he could not wait to spend the rest of his life with me. After he was done talking, my father began speaking. He just wanted to make an impression that I was not the kind of lady most men in their right senses would want to settle down with. Rather than giving encouraging words, or better still, keep quiet, he just spewed out trash. Keith, in his usual manner, tried defending me by saying that I was actually a changed person and had quit my past life, but my parents did not believe his words. And I quote you, "We are not debating the fact that she's changed, but all we're saying is that you be sure of what you want, you know? We don't want fingers pointed at us tomorrow as the parents who had deceived a suitor into marrying their daughter, from whom they knew was not fit to be a wife." Hot tears began streaming down my cheeks, and my parents didn't even seem to care. "We're not opposing your wedding, but we don't want to be held accountable for her future actions. We washed our hands of her long ago." That was my father's closing remark. Keith and I left the house with me desiring to not see them at my wedding, and I meant it. Update number 4. After Keith and I received our parents' consent, I decided to introduce him to my followers on YouTube as my fiancé. I was thrilled to see how happy they were for me in the comments, and it felt like a dream come true. It was an excellent opportunity to show everyone that one could still find love and get married despite past mistakes. We began making preparations for our wedding, which was the most significant event in our life. We wanted it to be perfect, so we made sure everything was in place. The big day finally arrived, and it was live streamed on my YouTube, allowing my followers to share in our joy. The wedding ceremony was beautiful, and the reception was just as amazing. However, things took an unexpected turn when my estranged sister, Rosaline, grabbed the microphone, made a speech. I hadn't seen her in years, and I had no idea what she was even going to say. She began by talking about how people could have their cake and eat it too. And then she proceeded to mention my past. She brought up my history of sleeping around with multiple men and failing to sustain a relationship, but then concluded by saying how happy she was that I'd finally found a rich and handsome man to marry, and just hope I wouldn't go and jump into the lap of the next man that I see. Wow. The crowd gasped in horror, and I was just beyond embarrassed. I knew my sister was only speaking the truth about my past, but it was like she was trying to open up old wounds that were still trying to heal. It was a very insensitive thing to say, and I could feel the stares of everyone in the room on me. I immediately rushed to my sister, who was stumbling around from the effects of alcohol. I could feel my anger rising, and I was ready to engage in a physical fight with her. However, my husband Keith stopped me just in time. As much as I wanted to defend myself and lash out at my sister, I knew it was better to remove her from the venue instead. It was the most humiliating day of my life, and I have no idea how to deal with it. I didn't want to pick up my phone or go online after that. I just wanted to be left alone with my thoughts. It's only been 3 days since the event, and I can't shake off the feeling of embarrassment. It's like everyone knows my past, and they're only tolerating me because of Keith's wealth and influence. The public embarrassment only made things worse between him and his parents, who had initially warned against the marriage in the first place. And I can't help but wonder if the whole thing is getting to Keith. I'm left with all these thoughts and doubts, and I don't know how to deal with them. Update number 5. A few days later. Hey guys, just an update a few days after my sister pulled that stunt at my wedding, and things have not really gotten better. My husband and I are trying our best to work through the issue, but it's been difficult with everything that's been going on. To take my mind off things, I decided to log on to my YouTube channel for the first time since my wedding, and I was greeted with an outpour of love and support from my followers, who were upset by the insensitive comments made by my sister. Reading their kind words made me feel a bit better, and I realized that I needed to focus on the people who were supporting me, rather than those who were trying to tear me apart. However, any sense of relief I have was short-lived as my mother paid a visit to my husband and me. I had hoped that she was coming to sympathize with me over what happened, but instead she began lecturing me about how I overreacted by sending my sister out of my wedding. She claimed that I had disgraced not just my sister, but my entire family, and I quote, "If the past was past as you claim, why then did you embarrass the family because your sister talked about it?" My mother opinioned. It was taken aback by my mother's word, and I just felt incredibly hurt by it. Anyone in the world who was not so biased would see that my sister should have kept her mouth shut, rather than making me look bad on my wedding day. As if that wasn't bad enough, my mother then demanded I apologize to my sister, both physically and on my channel. I was beyond mad, and I wanted to tear my mother to shreds, but Keith signaled to me, "Hey, baby, calm down." My mother left the house after Keith promised her that we would think about what she said, but he noted after she was gone that he was not happy with the way that she handled the things. Well, we talked about it for a while, and I told him I was not ready to apologize to my younger sister, when she was the one who owed me the apology. He reassured me he loved me and would stand by my side no matter what. His unwavering support helped me to feel so much better, but the situation with my family was still weighing heavily on my mind. How could they just take sides with my sister while I was the one who was wronged? I know that I've made a mistake in the past, but I've worked hard in my life to turn it around. And I don't know, I don't want to be constantly reminded of my past mistakes every day. As I lie in bed tonight, I can't help but feel like my life is spiraling out of control. It seems like no matter what I did, somebody was always going to be unhappy with me. I wish things could just go back to the way it was. just Keith and I staying by ourselves and loving in peace. Update number 6. After the mother's visit. After my mom's visit, I felt more alone than ever. It was like the only person who understood me was Keith. He was my rock, and I was grateful to have him. One day, he suggested that I visit my sister and talk to her about what happened. At first, I was hesitant. I didn't want to face her again. However, Keith convinced me that it would help me to let go of the anger I felt towards her. Mend the relationship with the family, etc., and ultimately help me heal. I decided to take Keith's advice and visit my sister. Before I left, I updated my followers on YouTube about the whole ordeal. Most of them were of the opinion that my sister was at fault, and that she should be the one trying to make peace. I was glad that I had their support. When I got to my sister's house, I was nervous. I didn't know what to expect. Would she be hostile? Would she apologize? I was just hoping for the latter. But I didn't want to get my hopes up. I told her how insensitive her statements were at my wedding, and how my in-laws were trying to get their son to divorce me as a result of it. I was hoping that this would make her realize how much her words hurt me, and she would then apologize. But to my surprise, she began defending herself. She said that all she said was the truth, and that I wasn't meant to be overreacted by kicking her out at the wedding. I was hurt by her words, but I didn't want to engage in a fight with her. I simply left her home, and I went back to my house. When I got home, Keith asked me how the meeting went. I told him the truth. He asked that I just let it slide. He said that my sister was not ready to apologize, and that I should just focus on the positive things in my life I have going for me. I knew he was right, but it was hard to let go of the anger I felt towards my sister. I decided to get back at her and my parents. I made a video about how my parents had abandoned me for years after they discovered I was hooked on drugs and had a dirty lifestyle. I went on to explain how I struggled alone till I met Keith, who helped me through the process. The video finally ended with me stating how my parents tried dissuading my husband from marrying, and even went as far as asking me to apologize to my sister after I sent her away for embarrassing me on my wedding day. I posted the video on all my social media handles, with my sister's social media handles tagged in the video, and of course I added my parents' phone number too. I asked my viewers to ask them to stay out of my life. The reaction has been more than expected. My parents and sister are currently being trolled by my sympathizers for my sake, after which my parents and sister have been isolated by other family members too. It feels good knowing that my parents and sister now have their hands full, but that does leave me with the ultimate question for the post. Am I the a-hole for getting my sympathizers to mess with my parents, troll them, and sister, after they unjustly demanded that I apologize to my sister who embarrassed me on my wedding day? Alright guys, so today's story was a pretty crazy one. Let me know what you think about it and how the little bit of revenge that OP was able to get. Do you think that it was good or bad? Would you have done the same thing? Go ahead and drop your opinions down below. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Guys, if you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I try to read stories every single day. Some very dramatic stuff, including Am I the A-Holes, inheritance drama, Karen stories, you name it, we cover it. So make sure you subscribe for daily videos. Have a fantastic one, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace!